COPWATCH, policing the police every single day.
Sheriff Kirkersville says he's shocked and heartbroken by the sudden death of his new police chief. Good evening, I'm Rodney Dunnigan. Reynoldsburg police say James Hughes Jr. was discovered yesterday in his home. Rob Wells is live in Kirkersville for us tonight. And Rob, this is yet another tough loss for that community.
It's a huge loss, Rodney, and it's really hard to comprehend. Keep in mind, we were just here 3 weeks ago when they just dedicated a brand new bench to fallen police chief Eric Desario, who died just over a year ago. Now, nearby, another brand new memorial for 35-year-old Chief James Hughes Jr., who was named to the position March 18th. Reynoldsburg police tell me that Hughes' body was discovered about 11 a.m. yesterday morning by his wife in their Reynoldsburg home. The police chief tells me that Hughes was taken to the Franklin County Coroner's office for an autopsy. A lieutenant working on the case would only call this a death investigation. Hughes was the second chief to be hired in the community after the fatal shooting of Chief Eric Desario and 2 nursing home workers just over a year ago. The mayor said that he'd had a meeting with the new chief just Thursday night at his home. He told Hughes he'd be working full-time, and Hughes discussed his plans and all of his goals for the department. The mayor telling me that Desario and Hughes knew each other for years, making this loss even tougher.
And him and Chief Desario went to the academy together. They knew each other. Even though they worked different departments, they was contacts. So he knew him real well. He came here, people, that first week too was kind of rough, but after that the people thought he'd done a good job.
And as you just heard, the mayor said that he did face opposition when he hired Hughes. We interviewed Hughes recently himself about his past employment with the Fairfield County Sheriff's Office. Employment records show that he resigned from that job after an arrest at a Whitehall fast food restaurant. Meanwhile, the mayor said he will hold a special meeting with council on June 6th to decide what to do next, where to move on from here. In the meantime, neighboring departments will help out in the meantime to keep this community safe. Live in Kirkersville, Rob Wells, ABC 6 News.
Police chief stole drugs from evidence locker and then fatally overdosed on them. An Ohio police chief was found dead in his home after he'd overdosed on opioids he had stolen from the department's evidence locker. By Matt Agarist, August 3, 2018. Kirkersville OH illustrating just how large of a grip the opioid epidemic currently has on the United States. The police chief of an Ohio police department has overdosed on fentanyl that he stole from the department's evidence locker. Kirkersville Police Chief James Hughes Jr., 35, was found unresponsive in the bathroom of his home earlier this year on May 25. After unsuccessful attempts at reviving him, Hughes was pronounced dead shortly after. Reynoldsburg Police Department Lieutenant Ron Wright, whose department is heading up the investigation into the case, told the Newark Advocate that the drugs Hughes was taking were evidence in other cases. There was packaging that indicated that he was taking controlled substances from there, he said, indicating that the chief had overdosed on drugs taken from the evidence locker. An autopsy was carried out on July 13 and it found that Hughes had died of an acute intoxication by fentanyl. Hughes had just become the police chief in March and was only on the job a few months before he overdosed. He was hired in March and wasn't here that long, but he kept me informed about what was going on, Kirkersville Mayor Terry Ashcraft told the Newark Advocate after Hughes' death. A lot of stuff goes on in this town, and he'd come and done his job and never had a complaint on him. Despite the mayor saying Hughes never had a complaint, the Advocate reports that Hughes' checkered history was discovered by them following his hiring in Kirkersville. The mayor and village council members were reluctant or declined to answer any questions about that history, which included a misdemeanor conviction in Whitehall for disorderly conduct for a 2013 incident at a fast food restaurant drive-thru in which Hughes used a racial slur. According to police, they originally investigated who sold Hughes the drugs so they could charge that person. However, once they realized he'd stolen the drugs from the evidence locker himself, there was no one to charge in his death. Wright told the Advocate that he plans on handing over the case to state officials in the next few weeks. It's kind of gone beyond our level. You're talking about another agency's property room, he said. We think the state should probably intervene. Wright implied that other officers in the department could have possibly had access to and taken things from the evidence locker as well. There appeared to be some practices happening out there that probably someone from the state AG's office should probably look into, he said. Tragically, Hughes left behind a wife and 3 young children. After he overdosed, a GoFundMe account was set up to help the family. This case illustrates no one is immune from the grips of the opioid crisis in America. Sadly, as tens of thousands continue to die every year, most people in government are attempting to solve the problem with force and violence instead of science and logic. As TFTP has reported at length, every day, more than 100 Americans die in the United States from opioid overdoses, and while this epidemic has become increasingly devastating in recent years, a natural plant that has been shown to combat opioid addiction is still deemed illegal by the federal government. According to research from the National Institute on Drug Abuse, as of March 2018, more than 115 people in the United States die after overdosing on opioids. These overdoses can be attributed to prescription pain medications, which are prescribed like candy with little warning about how dangerously addictive they are, heroin, which many addicts turn to when they lose access to prescription opioids, and fentanyl, which has become increasingly popular despite its deadly track record. The rise of the opioid epidemic at home has coincided with the United States' control of poppy production worldwide. Before the US invaded Afghanistan in 2001, there were around 189,000 heroin users in the United States. By 2016, that number had increased dramatically to 4.5 million users. The longest war in the nation's history has resulted in the US controlling 90% of the world's opium supply. The government claims it can end the epidemic at the same time it is encouraging it by criminalizing a natural plant has been shown to combat opioid addiction. A study published in August 2017 found that when participants used cannabidiol, CBD, it actually blocked the opioid reward in their brains, and as a result, the finding that cannabidiol blocks opioid reward suggests that this compound may be useful in addiction treatment settings. Additionally, the National Institute on Drug Abuse has stated that medical marijuana products may have a role in reducing the use of opioids needed to control pain. Studies have also shown that deaths from opioids plummet in states where cannabis is legal and that 80% of cannabis users give up prescription pills. The federal government is also prolonging the opioid epidemic by pushing for a ban on kratom, a natural herb derived from the coffee plant that has served as a life-saving alternative for individuals who are addicted to opioids. Instead of acknowledging the success of kratom, the Food and Drug Administration is attempting to have it labeled as a Schedule I drug, which would mean that they claim it has no medicinal value. In a letter to the FDA, a group of scientists argued that banning kratom would actually increase the number of deaths of Americans caused by opioids because many people who have found kratom to be their lifeline away from strong opioids will be vulnerable to resumption of that opioid use, whether their prior opioid use was for relief of pain or due to opioid addiction. Unfortunately, tens of thousands more will likely die before any rational and scientific approach is brought forth by the state that will actually help to curb this epidemic. A police chief who likely kidnapped and caged hundreds of people for substances deemed illegal by the state has overdosed. But his death should not be in vain. Instead, it should serve as a wake-up call to the rest of the drug warriors who think locking people in cages is the proper way to fix a health problem. Police use who may want to retaliate against him physically.
Hey Charlotte County, this is Charlotte County Cop Watch, and I just wanted you to know that I am using this stuff under fair use. And also remember to like and subscribe this channel. Also too, keep in mind I do not make any money on YouTube. This is 5 hours work a day, you know, fighting for freedom. And you can donate with PayPal and Patreon. I just want you to think about this. If everybody gives to PayPal and Patreon, Patreon is every month. Actually, PayPal you can do every month. I have 12,000 subscribers. If everybody gives, I can quit my regular job and go full-time investigations on Charlotte County and possibly even more and beyond. So just keep that in mind. If everybody helps out, I can go full-time doing this. Thanks.